Good. It's still morning, right?
The stairs keep killing me.
Yeah. There are a lot of stairs. All right.
This morning, figured out to. Yeah.
All right. We got about
So I was doing.
30 minutes. I'll be right back.
Was it hard? You haven't sent those?
No, actually, you just have, it's a lot of back and forth. You have to go to the sex offender site and look it up based on county, download that Excel sheet. And then just scroll to the bottom, get the total, and then I opened a new Excel sheet and just started plugging in the totals for the county.
Okay.
And then what we did, and that one time when we like separated and put the towns next to it, that was actually all the counties.
Oh,
I love your shirt. Yeah, thanks. This was me and my best friend, like last minute, it was like last year. It was his last concert. It was in Atlanta, Georgia. And my friend Sierra texted me and was like, he's gonna be in Atlanta. We need to go see him. The tickets were only like, I think they were only like maybe at most $50. Like they were really cheap. Yeah. So we bought them and like drove to Atlanta all last minute.
That sounds really fun.
It was great. The whole trip was great.
Spontaneous friends like that.
I don't have any.
Yeah, I'm kind of like this, but I enjoy spontaneous stuff like that. They're like, I gotta know weeks in advance.
Yeah, I need time to plan and
Yeah.
say, yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of me right now, since I'm in school, I don't have a job. My
Yeah.
boyfriend is the primary income.
Mhm.
And so like now whenever she's like, let's go do this, I'm like, girl, I'm broke.
Yeah.
I don't have any money.
You paying for me?
1 minute. No, don't. There we go. Is there any way we can go over the assignment? Lily? Yes, certainly. I'm confused on how to start. Exactly. Cool. We'll talk about that. All right. So we got 1 minute. All right. So let's talk about you need to do a review, and I'm going to show you number stuff today. I kind of relate to that because what I want you guys to do with assignment 2 is to start playing. So between, actually, what I'll do is I'll share my screen. You need to, yeah. That's because what I've asked you to do is to kind of go out into the unknown and tell me what it is that you want to look at. Now you can run with the idea that we were playing with in class. That's the places to disappear. What you'll find in the research there, which is why I kind of like that one, is there really isn't much anything out there like that. Most best I could find was places where people politically disappear, that kind of thing. We have those crimes of disappearances, not like as in we're actually going to go and try to typify places and see where missing people go from. Yeah, it's that's something that. And so if you want to take a stab at that, it's kind of its own little unique thing. So have fun with it, right? But I'll pull it up and then we'll go through it. Actually, what I'm kind of looking for, because it's with these things, it's always reiterative in nature. So let me show you. Screen one. All right, so down here under assignments. So this first one got you looking at some of the stuff. Second one, so it's got 2 attachments to it. This outline is actually from another person's. I kind of set up them, which is why sometimes it'll reference things like crime. Just think of that as your general topic. And so here, if you were to look at this basically outlines what you'd see in this other one. And so this is actually from my own dissertation. And so I'm not looking for anything like this level, not anything that specific. Basically what I'd be looking for is like, what, 3 to 5 sentences where you kind of identify, where's that at? Right. That would go right over here, where you identify what your problem statement is, right? When I say problem statement, it's like, what is it you're trying to deal with? What is it you're trying to address? In this case, like with that first assignment, it was trying to identify where people go missing from where places, where people go missing, that kind of thing. That's basically your problem statement is we have people who disappear. We don't know what we want to do with them or how to find them, that kind of thing. And so just basically frame the issue. So that'd be literally just a few sentences there. When it says outline logic statements for variables included, that's the part I want you guys to have the most fun with. What kind of relationships would you expect here? You're going to have your common control variables. That's going to be things like age, sex, race, income, things like that. But what other things would you think that might be related to? Well, some degree to the people who go missing, to some degree to those places, because people are bound to places in some way, shape, or form. So play with it. Right? This is more creative than it is for completionists, I guess, than it is heavily assessed. I'm not going to be going like, okay, your research question, double barreled here, that kind of thing. No, play with it. Try to get it as close to the kind of format that you see for the PDF I have there, where it's got the chapter 3 methodology there. But that's about it. Because if you look at it, that first paragraph there's just framing it. Second one just starts to identify some of the relationships that are at play. Right? Moving to research questions, the big thing is what is it we're trying to look at? And then if you come with one RQ, one hypothesis for each, one for this one, that's fine. That'll work for now. Because I'll build it out and I'll show you the kind of stuff we can do. Probably the first thing that we'll be doing is, well, one, just see what relationships exist. We'll check it against variables. We'll also check it spatially to see how stable it is. So that's one of those things that's different that way than it is over with the numbers. That's more the abstract kind of thing versus concrete. From there, it just goes into the different topics. So you just do a little bit of research into those different things that you've identified in that second paragraph, right? As you identify those logic statements, that's basically theory. If you've had theory, great. If you haven't, don't worry about it. But if you have, that's what theory is. So if I said, routine activities theory, the presence of a target in the absence of a suitable guardian, motivated offender, acts on, right? Those are the propositions. You have those 3 things coming together in time and space, you get a crime. That's that theory. And so what factors affect those 3 things, right? With other theories, it's different things like social disorganization theory. You start dealing with population shift and those types of things in ways that those great things. You deal with strain theory. It's got to do with the negative situations, negative stimuli that people receive, and the negative affect, the negative emotional state stimuli that put people into, right? And so what factors affect that and the issue. And so that's how we played with it, right? And so play. If you have trouble finding any research or anything like that, if you're having trouble finding anything on the topic, let me know. I know the library here is a little bit limited. It takes a little bit more time to get these interlibrary loan stuff. Usually that's pretty quick turnaround, couple days. But if there's anything in particular that you're thinking about, and you don't know where to start, just bring it to class. Go, hey, I'm thinking about this. Where would I want to start looking for that? And we can figure that out. Some of those things I'll know right off the top too if I want. But first thing is get your words on paper, then I can start adding my words to it. Right? That's how it works. So don't stress out about this. Really, really don't. Because it's mainly just see what you guys can do from the outset, because then I'll start showing you how I write. Cool. So don't stress out. It's a lot though. It is asking for a lot in terms of, what is this, 2 pages kind of thing. So hypothesis 1, repeat as necessary. Variant variables. So basically you start out talking about your dependent variable because that's the issue, right? If you're interested in mass shootings is your dependent variable. If you're interested in places where people have disappeared, right? Your dependent variable is going to be those disappearances. Maybe play with that because there's 16 different ways you can slice it. Right? You can look at the places at different levels. You can look at the people at different groups. You can do all kinds of different things. And so just so I can get an idea for what interests you, because it goes in different directions all the time. Yeah. Explain what it is, what it does, how it works. Then state what you mean. That kind of gets the conceptual definition. That's about the only one that has a that's the only one that specifically, I think we'll have language in it says, for this, the conceptual definition of this was blank. The rest of them is just kind of inferred through other people's definitions. And then data. This one you won't necessarily know. So put in there where you think you'll be putting it, where you think you'll get it from. Like the census data. That's going to be some of your population stuff, right? And then look at the kind of information that's in this outline and see if you can recreate something kind of similar for it. Because that's essentially what you're doing over and over again, right? Data. To answer the research questions, how many data sources were used? And you can actually start out just like that. But you wouldn't say dissertation, you'd say manuscript, something like that. First, individual level learning is like, so were there processes involved? You won't know all that yet because we're figuring it out as we go. That's why I said it's constantly reiterating. First thing is getting words on paper. Well, first thing is getting the idea going, and then it's getting words on paper, and then it's messing with the numbers, and it's bouncing back and forth a whole bunch of times until you go crazy. And welcome to methods. I can try to pull up your links. Couldn't. Any advice? What I do wrong? The links. You couldn't open those links in there. They should be working. I'm not 100% though on your guys' side. So do check those, but they should, if you just click on them, it should just download it automatically like that. And that will get you that. So that next one's unit of analysis and measures. Except do your best. If you're dealing with, say you're interested in the state of Texas, I'm trying to remember what it was the person was interested in was in the state of Texas. Some type of crime is what it was. What is that crime? We're dealing with the incidences, that kind of thing. Just think about it. Play with it. And then what I get, we'll look at that and I'll start editing it up like what I do with other papers. Whenever I'm editing them. Don't hide it. Cool. Dependent variable. Again, that's just going to kind of echo this to a large degree. But instead, what this one does is it gives you the operational definition. So for this specific, I used the decennial census for 2020. I used the what would it be? This measure for age and sex off, that kind of a thing. So it's measures for age and sex. What you do is you look at it, and this one's like total population, maybe selected age categories, that kind of thing. So you have all these different categories you can play with. And as we go through through this next section, as we get ready for the review, I'll start playing with this and show you what I mean, because you'll see some of the concepts we talked about already. You'll see pretty quickly. Like first one, I'll show you multi-collinearity. That one's always funny because it pops up immediately if you're doing it on an unrefined level kind of thing. But from there, let's see, key explanatory variables. What I mean by that is you're separating out the things that are different from your control variables. You control for demographics, that kind of stuff. But if that's what you want to focus in on, then you wouldn't necessarily have a control variable section. It's like that's what you need to focus in on, the demographic aspects, stuff with the disparities there, stuff like that. But like if you had something that was particularly interesting to you that you want to pop in there, pop it in there and see what we can do, right? And then if there's areas that we plug in a data set, we'll do that because it's actually, you'd be surprised at the different stuff we can do. Analytic strategy. That first sentence, you don't need to worry about so much. Sampling frame. That one's actually pretty important because that starts to tell you what kind of thing you're dealing with. For most of us, we'll be using things like total populations because you're dealing with, like the census data is of the total population. It's extracted out, but that's what you're dealing with for picking up individualized data. Like if you were to grab a survey, set of survey questions and data from the internet, your sampling frame's gonna be whatever it was that they started out with to go get the data. Like if they had a survey, the list of emails that they sent that survey to, that's their initial sampling frame. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward, because that's actually in subsequent chapters. We're ahead of ourselves a little bit there. And the levels of measurement for all variables included. That's one that's pretty straightforward. We covered that one pretty early. Nominal ordinal interval ratio. For correlations, regressions, don't worry about that. I have some flow charts I'll share about later. I'd actually forgotten. Someone asked me about that. I couldn't remember what they were asking me about. That was this morning. Like, now I see. It's like, as it says, it mentions stats, logic, flow charts. I'll get those to you so that way you can see those, because what it'll do is it'll start to identify things like nominal ordinal interval ratio. Where's got that? NOIR. What it will do is it will show you things like that. Ratio, it won't look exactly like this, but it'll arc off to, it's this kind of data set. It's you want to use this type of chart or graph or that kind of thing. It'll say this type of measurement for central tendency, things like that. So it's like, you know what type of measure to use, and because you know what types of measures there are, you know what kind of analyses to use, and those build off into, from here, you start getting into correlations and then regressions kind of thing. And that's across all, so it's have specific charts, they'll have specific measures, percentage tendencies, that kind of stuff. But that's a little bit more advanced. So don't worry about that too heavily, just play with it and see what you put in there, that kind of thing. Because here's what I want to do next. All right, where was that? Down. This is, that's not the right one, is it? Nope, that's PDF. Self-report measures. We talked about that last time. Surveillance systems. Okay, so I need to download another one of these. Oh, wrong class. Have I popped it in there yet? Let's see if I have. Oh, wrong class. There we go. Okay, so here's where we're going to start talking about experimental methods. Quasi-experimental design. So we've talked about this stuff a little bit already, because I talked about pre-test, post-tests. You remember those lessons? You guys remember that a little bit? Yes, no? Yes, no. No. Okay, we'll talk about it again real quick. It's real simple because it's literally the initial set for the classical experimental design. Okay, so you'll have group 1 and group 2. This will be our experimental group. This is our control group, right? And so what we do is, if you're doing the classical design, you'll do is you'll test here, test here, here you'll add in your whatever your kind of actual experimental thing is, whether it's a treatment, whether it's some type of change, something like that. These people get nada. And then you come in and you test again. Right? And as you're doing that, what that allows you to do is one, you can test between these things to see if there's any differences between your groups from the outset. Right? So you can double check to make sure that these groups are equal. And if for some reason they're not, there's different ways to make them equal. The book will talk about sampling in the next chapter, and the easiest thing to know about that is it's randomization. You make it random, everything just kind of goes wherever it would normally. And so by taking hands off, they tend to equal, but there's other ways to do it too. You test, make sure okay, they test equal. What kinds of changes took place and how different do they look now? Right? And so you can quite literally see the actual effect of something. This will be affect it all. Right? And so as you yes, group two. It depends. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It's all going to be dependent on the type of study that you deal with. Whenever I pull up the PowerPoint list, I want to say it keys off in the medical stuff because that's typically how they do it. Ideally, you would want a placebo for medical things because of the Hawthorne effect. I talked about that one early in the semester. That kind of a thing. Placebo effect. Hawthorne's the same thing as people are watching. By the fact that I'm taking something, I'm likely to have an effect, right? The psychological one. And so, experimental methods and quasi-experimental designs. Okay. I don't care about learning objectives. There's a bunch of them. Okay, so this is an applied approach to research. This one explains. So if you remember those purposes, this is the one that actually gets to explaining things. Really what you're getting to is actual causation. We can say, this is the only factor that we have that can account for these differences if they're statistically significant. Right? And here it mentions experiments involve taking action, observing consequences. There's a whole bunch of different ways that you can experiment, but that's the classical design right there, because this allows for that time aspect of it. Time comes in and you're able to make that test to see that this is what changed. So if you're doing a cross-sectional study, what you would do is you'd have multiple groups and whichever one had it present, you'd make these groups similar and you'd see what differences there are between groups, right? You get at the same kind of effect a little bit. Here it's more direct because you're seeing the same people across time. That's why it's better. We don't do that in our field because we deal with large numbers of people across time. Just dealing with large numbers of people, the longitudinal stuff is extremely expensive. You have tracking and all that kind of stuff too if you're really doing it. All right, so here's what they say. Independent and dependent variables, pre-testing and post-testing, experimental control groups. It's this right here. Test score is going to be your dependent variable. This right here, explanatory variable. Well, it could be a control variable if you wanted to, but you'd be talking about your independent variables. This right here. Does this actually have an effect here? That's what we're testing out. Okay. The independent variable takes the form of either dichotomous. I don't like that. I don't like that at all because that's not true. Independent variables can take many forms. The simplest is a dichotomous measure where you're talking presence or absence. That's actually one of the most simple ways to have any type of variable. Does it exist or does it not? right? Is it present or absent? Um, yeah, it varies depending on the experimental process they call it. Yeah, so that's they're just measuring it out. That's what it is. So they're explaining it. I don't like that explanation. Right? So you have your thing you're looking at, the thing you have think makes a change. This is one way to test it. One's a cause, one's an effect. You measure them, and well, if there are changes, you follow this appropriately. You can say that those changes are attributable to this. If it comes up, that's like statistically. That's it. Okay. What if you took part in social science experiment? Assurances we expect. Okay, so that's a little bit different. Assurances. Here's what I talk about the groups: experimental and control group. Right? Who gets the experimental treatment? Who does not? You'll need a control group, ideally, so that way you have someone who can see what it looks like if nothing takes place. But it is quite common if you're saying where you got something like placebo or multiple types of treatments. Like think about psychology. It's like how many different psychology types or treatment types are there? It's like you got cognitive behavioral, you've got and you just go on from there, right? And so you just keep going. And so you can have however many different types. And if you want to have one that's controlled too. All right. That's just given, that's Hawthorne effect. We've already talked about that. Workers respond more to attention than improving work conditions. Yes. Placebo. This is where they talk about the placebo. So you want it to be blind, ideally. Ideally, you guys have heard the phrase double blind study, yes? You know what that means?
The experimenter and the
Yes.
both of them are blind.
Yes. No one knows who's who. Right? So that's one where it's even the experimenter does not know which party's which. Because of that, you don't get the Hawthorne effect because no one knows who's who. Placebo effect might be decreased if you're taking something, that kind of effect. And those other cues where if you have someone who knows who's who, those other cues don't come through. We can have the unofficial acknowledgments that you are in an experimental group or a treatment group or that kind of thing. Think about medical treatment's probably the easiest one. We have no experimental medical treatment for this cancer type. Okay, who's getting the actual experimental drug and who's not, and who's going to be happy with that and who's not. Right? You might be assigned to control group. Okay, I'm in the study, but didn't get the drug. All right. Participants don't know what they're taking. Insurance change from yeah, not psychological. Yep, you're really talking about double blind. Yeah, selecting subjects. Here's where they start talking about random sampling. So that's in here. Sampling will come up more. So here they'll talk about that when you're setting up these groups. Now, if you've identified the problem that you want to address, the next thing is identifying who or what it affects. It's identifying your subjects. Dealing with that, it mentions there. Ensure that your two groups are as similar as possible. And it mentions randomization does this. Okay, so how does randomization work? It doesn't really matter what shape you have in terms of the line. And so if you're dealing with those shapes right there, basically what it does is if you have an equal sampling frame, meaning you have a full list of everyone who's there. If you were just to assign random numbers to everybody and take the first X number, right? What's going to happen is if it's truly random, you're going to have people across this. They might cluster in some areas, but it'll be random. Right? And so if you're looking at the average for that sample, the average score will range typically pretty close to in here, because as it's sampling across, that average is going to stay. very close to the population's average. The more times you sample out of it, and so if I've sampled out of it multiple times, and I keep sampling out of it at random, what ends up happening is it starts stacking up like that. Those central tendencies, they call that central limit theorem, right? Basically, then if you repeatedly sample something, it's going to mirror this kind of thing. And so if we've done this once, great, we got one. Do it again. There you go, you get your second group because they will closely approximate each other. It's one of the best ways to control for all the factors that you can't control in the study, right? How many people there are of a particular group, whether it's age, sex, race, whether it's medical background or whatever. Randomization is the hands-off way to do it. Hands-on ways that won't talk about so much in here, but there are ways to match, whether it's individuals or groups, that kind of thing. You can do it if you're dealing with individuals, you can match them as a group or at the individual level too. So there's a bunch of different ways to do it. Okay. Essential feature is randomization. Randomization ensures the average unit in the treatment group is approximately equivalent to the average unit in another group before treatment. All other things are equal. You think it's difficult to assign people to random groups? How hard is it to assign something randomly? It's one of those things it's interesting because when you get into it, people themselves, as they try to assign numbers randomly, they can't do it. You always fall into some type of a pattern, there's a repeated pattern of people. So you have to use machines to do it, that kind of a thing. But on top of that, a lot of programs we have, you can set random assignments, you just have lists. Randomization is just a few button clicks. That's a lot of fun. All right. Experiment to potentially control for many threats of validity. So here's where they start getting into threats of validity and that kind of stuff. Some of this, I think I'm going to hold off on some. I'm going to show you some of that. Maybe I'll show you some of it as we go. Don't want to show you now. I'll show you later. We'll move first. Okay. So validity and reliability. If you remember when we're talking about that, validity is it right? Is it the accurate thing? If you're looking at a bullseye, did you hit the target? Reliability is can you consistently hit whatever it was you're hitting? So ideally you want both. So it's going to start out with validity internally. So within itself, not in terms of external validity is generalizability, right? Anybody hear that term? That's what they're talking about. Is it true? And is it true beyond you? That's external validity. So history, maturation, and testing. We'll start with those. Those are all timeless, right? What's going on in the world? This is COVID-19. COVID-19 is huge example of that. The hurricane in North Carolina, another example of that, right? Everything in the world's changing because of something going on. It can be something big or something small, but it can be something. Let's see. I had a former teacher who was studying fear of crime in it was Katrina. It was like in the time frame of Katrina. Started beforehand, then Katrina took place. It's like, ooh, that whole study and set up that went off the rails because everything in the world changed. So now you got a new study taking place just right off the top here. You know? And so those things matter a lot. Maturation has to do with that time element, right? So we have those two groups, test 1 and test 2. How much time is taking place? A lot can happen in that time. Those people who were started out similar, they're not so similar over time. You yourself change over time quite a bit. And then what does it do? Ooh. Test, retest, that kind of thing. Does the same kind of thing. Changes what you know, changes how you respond, changes how you act. And so those are all things that might have different effects on you. Instrumentation is the next one it talks about. That's going to be what we talk about. I'll show you that in a second. It's going to look like this. I grabbed the original. I don't think I did. I should be able to get it from here. Data.census.gov. I don't want the tables. advanced search. County, we'll say Oklahoma. I've shown this to you guys before, right? Yeah, you've seen this part before. So all counties within Oklahoma. All right. Now that you're thinking about it, how are you going to work tables? We'll see if it comes up with anything. If it doesn't, I've downloaded some stuff. I'll show you what I mean. The difference between the two a little bit. All right. So if you notice, these have different call outs, different codes on them, that kind of stuff. The one I probably want is probably DP01, I think. Yeah, DP1. DP. Do. See how long it takes it to come up. Oh, 4. There we go. This guy, 2020 demographic profile. No data. It's there. I love this thing. Half the time it does this to me. Anyhow, well, I got it at a different point in time. What I was going to show you is that. Okay, so this is what the thing will look like whenever you look at the data itself. And so if you're looking at this, or if it's a survey, I'll show you a survey in a second too, because I should have some survey stuff too. All right. And so the numbers you get here, or how it's, whatever you get in terms of data, it's going to be dictated by how you have these things set up, right? Whether it's the questions you set up, the survey you set up, or if you're just inputting the data yourself. And sometimes you're combining that since you're doing that, not actually entering it yourself, but moving it around a little bit. And so if you look at this, let me see if I can pull up the survey too. I should have one right here. We'll say from me to me has the words fictitious. Fictitious. How do you spell fictitious? I guess I spelled it right. Boom. Right. So that last one is to do with population. So all you see are numbers there. Numbers 0 to whatever it is. Whenever you start dealing with count numbers, like those types of numbers, those get treated one way. Some of these others will get treated differently. Enable editing. Okay. Oh, random assignment here. Age. How do we have age recorded? This instrumentation. Do we have the actual age? Is this what we got? Is it the date they were born? Do I have to do the math? Is it a category like 18 to 24? Each of those things determines this specific number here. Remember, since we're trying to figure out what's different between each of these individuals and the overall group as substance of what we're trying to do, how we have these numbers encoded really, really matters. The more variation there, the better. So this one is age, male, white, non-white. 1 through 4 is what it looks like here. Yeah. What would 1 through 4 be? For class year.
Freshman, sophomore.
Yes, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. Why wouldn't I write freshman, sophomore, junior, senior? Why would I go 1 through 4? How many years? Good God, it's been so easy. do it. 29, 30 to 59. I can't remember. However, the breakdown is 15 credits per semester, 2 semesters per year gets you to 120 in 4 years, something like that. Right. And so what you end up with is, for one, you're in a specific range for how many credits you have, how many days you've been in class, how much you've been exposed to those materials to some degree, wide variety of topics, yes, but how long you've been entrenched in this environment. And that time period is going to be consistent. So it should have been, that's semesters, that's not years. That's what I did there. I don't remember what I did there. Don't ask me to do math. I've not had any sleep. I can play with numbers. Can't do math. Because this is significant, and this distance here means something. We can actually measure it. Like there's more points in here, I guess is one way of looking at it. When you analyze it, you treat it like a line. Alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana, if you notice, all those are 0 and 1. Whether or not the person had ever used it. If I had to ask a different question, that number is going to change. Of course, right? Add in a time frame. Lifetime use versus use in the last year. They're going to correlate though. They're not the same thing. That's what they're talking about with that instrumentation stuff. Let's see right here. Statistical regression, extreme scores regress to the mean. So regression to the mean is a very common thing. One of the things that's very common for us to do, depending on our data set, is that when we do the central tendency measures I was talking about earlier, one of the other things that we look at are the shape of that distribution. I mentioned that before. But if it's something that's got a few cases that like really, really, really far extremes, think IQ. Most people are like 100, 15 points, 15 points, 15 points. And you got someone who's got a score of like 250. Whatever. It's like, oh my gosh. Get them out. They're not a normal person. Right? And so with them in there, since they're so far out, they'll affect the overall analysis, just their presence there. That's why I made the joke about Oprah Winfrey and income. If you want to fix income disparities in America, add in X number of Oprah Winfrey's and you fix it overnight. It's not how it works at all, unless you're a statistician, right? All right. Selection biases and experimental mortality, that kind of stuff. Ooh, one other thing I want to mention before that. Something that's really interesting, that regression of the mean, to take across time, even people who score exceptionally high on this, if you test them at different points in time, what's going to happen? Those are going to be lower scores. Those lower scores are going to cause that one high score to trade back down. Over time, things have a tendency to regress to the mean. That's also income in this country. If you look at wealth and its disparities, realize that our country is a little bit different because that top 1%, 10%, whatever you want to call it, they move around. That's different people at different times rather than countries where it's locked in. It's always the same group of people. And so that's one of those things. It's a different way of looking at it. Appreciate it. Selection biases and experimental mortality. So if you got something that's takes any time at all, people drop out. Another word is called attrition. When you're dealing with that, hopefully you don't have to deal with it. Very, very big issue because there's not much you can do about that. Selection biases are very common in certain types of research, but if you can, it's random. Not really a lot you can say about that. Not really what you can do about it. From there. Time, order, diffusion of benefits, that kind of a thing. We've already talked about the time. I don't know if we talked about diffusion of benefits. Have we talked about that yet? So this is one of those things where it can cause some problems depending on how the study itself is run. I'll talk about it in a couple of different formats. So we'll talk about this. I'll put this one over here to save it in my mind, the geographic stuff. So if you're thinking about like persons. Okay. We'll have some fun with this one. I'm gonna say we're gonna do an experiment on treatment for prisoners. We're gonna experiment on some prisoners today. Okay. As we're experimenting on these prisoners, we're gonna offer them what kinds of treatment do you guys want to give these prisoners? I don't follow them.
Treatment.
More yards. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so. Free time. We're going to give them more free time because we want their. What is it we want to change? Is it we want to change their is it for like a rehabilitative purpose? Is it for quality of life? That kind of thing.
I think one of them asked a question earlier.
Yeah, I had a hard time reading that from that far back.
I think they asked if it was due tonight or if they have more time.
Do it tonight. It's not that hard. You guys have had a week. I just want you guys to play with those ideas. Don't get to where you don't want to do it or push it off. It's just some words on paper. Not that hard. It is confusing. Put words on paper and I'll show you how it works. That's how that works. It's methodology. You have to work through it like that. Sorry. All right. So free time. If we're trying to deal with free time, or if we're dealing with free time, there's a few different ways that can benefit somebody, right? We're trying to improve the quality of their life, or we're trying to focus on some type of rehabilitative efforts. You got to figure out what your purpose is first. And so let's say it's just related to the quality of life. We're going to make it a little bit better. Maybe it has something to do with emotional health or something like that. Yeah, because that's what that does. So we're going to go out and look at this. Okay? So as you take, we'll say, a portion of prisoners and give them free time out in the yard that other prisoners are not getting, what could happen? This is the part where what could happen here? What's going to happen with that person who's getting specialized treatment?
Get targeted.
Yeah. This doesn't have to be something positive. It can be something negative or positive. That diffusion of benefits or displacement is the other phrase for problems, right? Basically, what ends up happening here is you can have this go either way, where it's, hey, maybe it's jealousy is what takes root. As that happens, this thing turns very negative, and the people who needed that actually get something worse. That can happen. Or if you do it in the positive way, hey, these people were really having some issues. Those issues are now being addressed. Guess what? There are less problems in the prison as such. Now the other prisoners there are receiving some of the benefits of that treatment. Here's where it gets even better. Let's say it's something like this. Let's say it's something like actual it's a work skill, right? You're dealing with a work skill. You start taking these prisoners and you separate them off into groups. One of them you're teaching a work skill to. One group, the other group you're not. If this work skill is that vital, those people there, what's the likelihood that someone's going to ask what's going on and find out more information? Yeah, Chelsea, there's something here. Those are negative one. 3 questions from the Zoom participants off topic. Don't worry about extending this. Don't stress out about it. This is an example of that. So if you're dealing with that work skill, as one person's picking it up, there's that opportunity for that transmit to someone who's not in that group. It's because they have communication, they're in the same environment. That thing can spread. You want to see on a geographic front? Does the same thing if you're dealing with people or if you're dealing with this thing right here. If I institute, we'll go real simple. We have an issue with, say, car break-ins in a particular line. Okay, that one line is having a pretty big issue. We go in and we put cameras in that lot and signs. Hopefully that will have an effect. How much of an effect is it going to have just within that lot? And how much of an effect is it going to have across the street where it's still visible? How much of an effect is it going to have a little farther down, because those people who notice those cameras move a little bit farther away every time they see it. And so it's something that shifts around. So finding those clean lines is real hard to do. That's that. Compensatory treatment, when we start talking about that, those are like your incentives and things of that nature. When we start moving to that, huge problems. You have to think about the nature of the issue that you're dealing with. If you're giving away whether it's material goods or money or things of that nature. If you're studying drug use and you offer money to someone who uses drugs, what's the likelihood that money goes to drugs? Start running into some problems there, right? So you can end up funding the problem that you're trying to fix in the first place. And that's troublesome. Here's where it talks about rivalry and demoralization. So some more of the negative. Yeah, comprised of the stimulus. Sometimes people will start working harder. Right? So if you had, let's say there was a work productivity thing you're looking at as an organization. It's competitive in nature. Someone's pulling ahead. There might be efforts on other fronts to make up the difference. That's just like that Kansas City experiment where we were talking about driving through those areas that were not getting coverage. One, no, those areas aren't getting coverage, so I'm going to make sure that I take a little bit out of my time to make sure that control takes place over there too. Demoralization, that's where, giving. And that's where we'll give up for today. How's that sound? And so with that, we'll finish out with this next class, and we'll play some more of the numbers because I didn't get to play those much either. What I'll do is I'll start showing you those correlations in SPSS and how to move the data into it. We'll pick that up on Monday. Cool? All right. Well, I will catch you all next. Have a good one.
Hey, Dr. Hurst, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I got a question. Some people were
Yeah.
wondering if it's possible to extend out the due date on that assignment too. Is that possible?
We could if we needed to, but the first thing, because this first assignment's really an initial draft, just gets you started to get you an idea for the types of topics that you want to go into if you want to run with one we have in class, or if you want to delve into your own topic, but it'll feed into the term paper. So it's one you really don't want to delay because it'll set everything back and it might end up cutting out an attempt to maybe a draft attempt at that term paper again if it's needed. So that's what you'd be trading off. And so that's a real hard thing to want to trade off. So I don't know. I'll think about it. If you guys need the extra time,
Yeah.
go ahead and send me.
Yeah, a lot of
people
people on Zoom had a question about that. Plus, when's that exam two?
Exam's not
Exam
right, but
two.
finish chapter out and
Exam one, I guess.
Oh, exam one was due a while back. I'd have to look that back up.
Are you sure?
I thought so.
There's
let
only
me-
two tests.
No, this is the midterm. I'm thinking the other class. This is the midterm. So we're about 2 weeks behind because of, well, I was out that last week, but the week before, and then we had conference right before that. And so we're a little bit behind there, but we'll be caught up. I would say that exam will be available. I was hoping to get through the review today. We didn't get that far. So that'll probably become available on Monday, and you'll have 1 week to get it done. Because I don't like to have a truncated schedule where it's available. But that one's already running a little bit late. So we really don't want to push off the second assignment. No.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I meant the exam one too. Yeah, there's only 2 exams in this class. So, but anyway,
yeah,
appreciate
My
Yeah,
pleasure.
appreciate your help.
Yeah.
And have a good weekend.
You do the same.
I have
Yeah.
a question as well.
Yeah, what's up?
So towards the end of the outline, it says something about correlation and regression
Yeah,
types. What exactly does that mean?
I spoke about that at the beginning of the class. Basically, that's one that's more advanced than what this class covers. If you want to take an attempt at it, you can, because there's an outline, a template out there. Or I shouldn't say template, kind of an example. If you want to take a stab at it, you can. But it mentions in there that there's flow charts, some logic flow charts for stats. I haven't made those available yet because that's way further ahead than where we are right now. So we'll get into that. But just
Okay,
about it. But
thank you.
don't stress out about it. Just give it an attempt. With that, have a good one, and I will see you all